Hello, everybody, and welcome back to EnglishLogica.com's vocabulary series. Today, we are going to look at some vocabulary related to the word big. So, things that are large or great or huge, not just physically, but figuratively as well. And we're going to look at some synonyms related to big and some idioms as well. So, let's get started. So, vocabulary for big. As I said, we're going to break this down into two parts. Part one will be our synonyms related to big, and then part two, our idioms. So let's start it on part one, our synonyms. And these are the words that we're going to cover. As usual, we split our words into our common use or everyday spoken English. All the words that you'll find are used much more commonly than others. And the others are the advanced exams words that we have featured on our website as well in our advanced exams database. So the words we're going to cover today are immense, massive, monumental, monstrous, enormous, tremendous, vast, boundless, and hefty. And in the advanced exams, then we'll cover Herculean, behemoth, voluminous, commodious, capacious, prodigious, titanic, and gargantuan. We have some more then in our common use because there's a lot of synonyms here. Our common use continues then with extensive, substantial, whopping, gigantic, colossal, and sizable. As you see, we haven't covered some simple words like huge and great and large, etc. We feel that they're far too so. We want you to learn some good words now in this video. So the first word in our common use then is immense and immensely. This is something extremely large or significant or covering a wide area. Now, immense is more likely to be used to talk about figurative size as opposed to physical size. It's something that covers a lot of space, or it impresses people maybe with its scale. It might be considered immense, like an immense building or an immense plan or an immense idea or concept. There's different ways you can use it, but more figurative than size usually, but not always. So our examples then, example one, an immense flash of light came from the sky. Example two, it was an immensely difficult time for me, but I got through it. Example three, the family were immensely wealthy. So you can see three different kinds of ways to use immense there. Our next word then is massive and massively. Large or heavy are made up of a large mass. Now, a lot of mass, and this is something that is constant even in space. This is the difference between mass and weight is something that is very heavy. It's a consistent weight, you might say, whether it's in space or not, but that's what mass means. So something massive can be large on a figurative or tangible scale. For examples then, there was a massive earthquake in the city, causing lots of damage. Example two, the mistake I made was a massive error in judgment, but I had to move on. Example three, the land was massively underdeveloped, so it sold for a low price. Our next word then is monumental and monumentally. This is great or large in significance or size. Ancient inscriptions on stones are often referred to as monumental inscriptions, as the inscriptions themselves are monumental in their significance. And that's not just about their size, that's their significance. In everyday usage, monumental is used to talk about significant or important actions or experiences, if something is monumental. So our examples then, it was a monumental relief to find out that things weren't as bad as I had first thought. Example two, it was a monumental misunderstanding of the situation. Example three, she tripped and fell during her performance. She said it was monumentally embarrassing. So you see that these are more figurative use than they are physical. Our next word then is monstrous or monstrously, large and having the appearance of a monster. So a slight tangent to the idea of being big, but sometimes people use the term monstrous in relation to something that is also very large as well. So you can use monstrous in terms of behavior. If the behavior is horrible or disgusting, it could be considered a monstrous thing to do. And then when used in physical terms, you would talk about something or someone as large and animal-like, a monstrous physique, for example. So our examples then, that was a monstrous thing to do. How could you do such a thing? Example 2. As far as I can see, the COVID death rates have been monstrously exaggerated. Example 3. The rugby player was so big, a lot of people said he was like a monster. So there's the noun there in relation to the adjective and adverb monstrous and monstrously. Our next word is enormous and enormously. This is something very large in size or amount, quantity. An elephant compared to a mouse, the little mouse can't even see it. So it's something that's absolutely enormous. If something is figuratively enormous, it can be anticipated to take a long time, like an enormous task or an enormous plan for the future. And it can have a huge effect on someone. Our examples then, the project was enormous in both scope and scale. It would take years to complete. Example 2, she was enormously grateful for the help they provided. Our next word then is tremendous and tremendously. And this is something that is significant or very considerable in size, scale, or intensity. So in an older use, you might hear it in a period drama, but it's not really used in this way in modern speech. But people might say that the show was absolutely tremendous, that it was awe-inspiring or wondrous. It gave that sense of awe. In terms of size or scale or intensity, tremendous is how effective something is. Okay. So our examples then, there was a tremendous outcry when the defendant was found not guilty of the crime. Example 2, I was tremendously impressed by the new product. Our next word is vast and vastly. This is something covering a wide space or appearing endless. So a desert can be considered or described as a vast stretch of sand in every direction because it seems endless. If something is vast, it seems to go on forever. So as an adverb, vastly, this recognizes the scale or scope of something. So our examples then, a vast landscape stretched out before them. Example 2, their culture is vastly different from ours. The next word is boundless and boundlessly. Of course, you might think of in the last example, we talked about the desert. The desert could be considered boundless, but it does have an end. It only might seem boundless. So this has no limits or restrictions. It's quite poetic or hyperbolic in use. So hyperbolic is something that is over the top or exaggerated usage. It's less common than our other synonyms, but it's not difficult enough to be in the advanced exams column. So we didn't put it with the advanced exams. You might replace your usage of boundless or boundlessly with infinite or infinitely. So just the idea that it doesn't end, it means the same thing as boundless. So example 1, they sailed across the boundless ocean. So there's a feeling of something a bit older there from a writing point of view, maybe the boundless ocean. People wouldn't really say that in modern speech. Example 2, my love for kids has no limits. Excuse me, my love for my kids has no limits. You could say it's boundless. Example 3, he threw money around like there was no tomorrow, like he was boundlessly wealthy. Okay, so there were no limits on his wealth. He had more money than sense, as some people might say. Our next word then is hefty or heftily. This is having a lot of weight or awkward bulk. Now, this is sometimes used in relation to a person's physical weight, but it is likely to offend someone if you call them hefty. It is an insult. The adverb isn't used much, heftily. It's a little bit awkward. You won't hear people using heftily much. So example 1 then, I was hit with a hefty fine for going through the red light. Example 2, he had always been a big lad, strong and stocky and heftily built. As I said, that usage of it you won't hear too much. Our next word is extensive and extensively. This is something stretching out over a wide space or covering a lot. Now, the extent of something is the distance that it reaches to, the distance to which it reaches. When something extends, it reaches out or expands. So figuratively, if something is extensive, it's comprehensive or covering a lot of detail, like extensive instructions, how to, for example. So example 1, the fire caused extensive damage to the building. And example 2, the shop interior had been extensively refurbished before reopening. Our next word then is substantial and substantially. This is something that is considerable or important in terms of size or value. If something is substantial, it suggests that it is large. Substantial can mean significant effect or influence rather than physically large. In example 2 then, you can see that you can use it to speak about negative values, and I'll explain that now when we see it. So in our first example, a substantial reward offered for the return of the child. So a substantial reward implies that there was a lot of money offered. Second example then, the amount was substantially less than promised. Okay, so it's a concise way of saying that it was a lot less than promised. It was a large amount less. So that's where substantially can be used to talk about something negative. Next word is whopping or whopper. This is something that's very big or oversized. I've been to Burger King. I'm sure you've heard of a Whopper burger. And this is the word it comes from. It's something that's of a whopping size. It's very big. And that's all it is. That's all that the Whopper means. Our examples then, there was a whopping hole in the floor. And number 2, oh, that bruise is going to get big. It'll be a whopper. Our next word is gigantic and gigantically. This is something that's larger than it should be. It's exceedingly big. So you can think of a giant when you say this. It sounds similar. Gigantic, giant. The thing in question is larger than expected. A person is gigantic or a thing is gigantic. It's bigger than usual. Example 1, there was a gigantic parade with people filling the streets for miles. It was gigantically successful and made a fortune. Our next word is colossus. This is something that has amazing or incredible power or strength. And it comes from the ancient word colossus, which means a large statue. The ancient Colossus of Rhodes in ancient Greece was over 100 feet tall, and it stood with its feet on either side of the entrance, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. So nowadays we have the word colossal to speak about something that's absolutely enormous. If you say that a person is a colossus, that means they have great influence and significant contribution within a particular discipline. So that writer might be a colossus in his field, that professor in the sciences, or something like that. Someone who's very, very important and significant. So example 1 is a colossal statue in the middle of the city, looking out across the sea. Example 2, everyone wanted to meet a famous writer. He was a colossus in contemporary literature. Our next word is sizable and sizably. This is something that's relatively large or big by comparison. If something is sizable, it's not necessarily enormous, but it's an amount worth noticing or respecting. So a sizable amount is something that maybe grabs attention. So example 1, the inheritance was a sizable amount. Not enormous, but it was considerable. Example 2, the salaries of the 2 employees were sizably different. So there was a considerable amount in difference between the 2 salaries. Okay, we'll move on now to our advanced exams synonyms. The words are going to get a little bit harder, a little more complicated, and you'll find a lot of these words on our website in the advanced exams vocabulary. So our first word is Hercules or Herculean, something having incredible strength. So Hercules, he was said to have the strength of a god or demigod in ancient Greek mythology. If something is Herculean, or Herculean, some people might say, it's impressive in terms of scale or scope. Example 1, the weightlifter was something of a Hercules, and he said he could lift a small car. Example 2, it was a Herculean task, and there was so little time to get it done. The next word is behemoth. Behemoth, and we only have the noun here. This is a massive or monstrous thing, a creature or an entity. So when I say entity, you see in our analysis I mentioned a global corporation. So you could say that a global corporation can be a behemoth compared to small businesses. It can be absolutely enormous. The use of the word behemoth to describe a physical thing singles it out as enormous compared to others. So in example 1, the battleship was a behemoth amongst the rest of the fleet. And example 2, of which you'll all be familiar with, small bookshops are suffering greatly as the behemoth known as Amazon attracts all their customers. So you're describing Amazon as a behemoth. It's a huge, monstrous entity. It's a massive corporation, and it has overshadowed all the smaller bookstores. Our next word is voluminous. Voluminous or voluminously. This is something that is very full and flowing, or a loose fabric. This is usually used in relation to clothing that is large and flowing, like a dress reaching out across the floor. So maybe a long wedding dress, for example, or a ball gown. Don't get it confused with the word voluptuous in relation to the body. They're two very different meanings. So example 1, she glided across the floor in her voluminous gown. Example 2, the dress hung voluminously from her body, trailing along the floor. So you see that it doesn't have a lot of usage. It's very limited in the context in what you will be talking about. Our next word is commodious and commodiously. This is something that is spacious or comfortable. You may have heard of the word roomy in this regard. It's a very roomy house. There's plenty of space in it. This is a more technical professional term. So again, because it's in our advanced exams vocabulary, you won't be using this on a day-to-day basis. In a house or apartment, plenty of space. Some might talk about it being commodious. Some real estate, for example, architecture, something like that. Also mean extensively, comprehensively. So the house was considerably more commodious than the old one. Number 2, the terms and conditions of the contract were explained commodiously across many pages. So we had the word extensively earlier. So commodiously in this term, or in this context, is similar to extensive. It's very comprehensive. Next word is capacious. Capaciously. This is something that has a lot of capacity or space. Okay, and the word capacity is about the volume or amount that can be contained in something or can be produced by something. Okay, so the capacity of a glass, for example, or the capacity of a factory to produce a certain amount of goods. So if something is said to be capacious, it means it can contain a lot. So example 1, the room was capacious, but it was so big it often got cold. Example 2, they ate. That's a mistake there. That should say they ate. They ate and drank capaciously, so none of them felt well next day. Our next word is prodigious. Prodigious. And the adverb prodigiously. This is someone who is incredibly gifted or noticeable, or someone or something of note. So something that you take notice of. So a prodigy, from the French word protéger, is someone that is incredibly gifted, someone who is incredibly gifted, tended to take over from the master. So there might be a master and prodigy sort of learning relationship going on. Something said to be prodigious has great or recognizable qualities. Example 1, the man had long been blessed with prodigious strength. Example 2, everyone knew the girl would get into the best university. She has always been prodigiously gifted. Next word is titan and titanic. This is something of enormous strength, intelligence, or significance. So a couple of different usages here. The Titans in ancient mythology were rivals to the gods. Clearly, they were big and strong. So if someone is said to be a Titan, it's not talking about their physical appearance or the size of their body, but it's someone who is considered influential and important. Okay, so similar to a colossus, you could have someone who's said to be a Titan in the industry or the discipline or their art, maybe. Um, so the ship Titanic was the biggest ship ever built at the time, which was why it was called Titanic. It had the aspects of a Titan, we'll say. So the next, our examples then, he was a Titan amongst his peers, respected and feared. Example number 2, the task of rebuilding the business was a titanic effort that involved every employee. Our next word is a gargantuan. This is something that is enormous or monstrous and possibly scary. It sounds like it's describing a kind of mythical monster like Godzilla. It's gargantuan. And maybe it is. Maybe that's where the words come from. It's quite hyperbolic, as in it's quite in use. You wouldn't hear people, it's very, very over the top. You wouldn't hear people using it much in casual conversation. So number 1, I didn't realize that there was a gargantuan interest rate alone. So that's very over the top to say something like that, to use that word gargantuan. Example 2, look at the size of that creature at the bottom of the ocean. It's gargantuan. So in our degrees table, which we do at the end of all these videos, or all of our synonyms, we just lay these out from left to right. And as you move from left to right, things get, the level increases. So on the left, then on the top, we have our common words on top, our advanced on the bottom, along the bottom. So left here, you see substantial, and as you're moving further right, tremendous, monumental, is something is then immense, boundless, colossal. So things are bigger, much more expansive and much larger as you move to the right. And the same then below in the advanced exams or vocabulary. Capacious is just something that's has capacity or space, but titanic and gargantuan and behemoth, these are much more powerful words. And so you get an idea of the level of size as you move from left to right. So we move along now to our idioms for big. There are lots and lots of idioms for big, but we're only going to cover a handful of them here, and we don't want to do too much of them, too many of them. So the first one we cover is as big as ass. Then eyes bigger than your belly, the bigs, a big ask, the big cheese, a big deal, in leagues, hit the big time, and get a big head. Just some examples then for each one of these. As big as a house. I ate far too much food during the first lockdown, and I put on so much weight that I feel as big as a house. Eyes bigger than your belly. I always order more food than I can eat. My mother always said my eyes were bigger than my belly. And that's true. She always did. The next one then is the big bucks. I can't wait until I become rich and famous and start earning the big bucks. So it's just from the American slang for dollars. Just means that you're going to have lots of money. Big ask. Look, I know you need someone to do that job for you, but it's a big ask. make sure you get someone who knows what they're doing. So the big ask, it's a difficult thing to ask someone to do. It's a lot to expect of someone. The big cheese. So this is someone who's just the boss, the person in charge. When the new guy started on his floor, he hadn't even been introduced to the boss. He made a fool of himself when he met her and asked, "So, who's the big cheese around here?" Our next is a big deal. So something that is important, or someone who is influential, maybe someone that deserves respect. The social media influencer was always trying to get free meals wherever she went. She would finish her meal in restaurants and say, "I don't see why I should have to pay. I'm something of a big deal on social media, you know." So we don't like her only. In big leagues. So this is the big leagues, obviously, say in sports, in football, for example, you're moving up in the leagues until you're in the Premier League. So when you're in the big leagues, you are at the top of your game and you're playing with the big boys, you might say. So the manager called everyone into the meeting and explained the situation. Okay, so now that we've signed this contract, we're on the way up. We're in the big leagues now with all the top companies. And then this one, we've put hit the in brackets because there are a couple of different meanings here. There's big time and then there's hit the big time and different ways to use them. So let's have a look at this. I worked for years and years before I hit the big time. Now I'm a household name. So hit the big time is just becoming success, maybe famous, that you've reached your goal. So that's what hit the big time is. You're on top of your game. Second meaning then, I had an exam the other day, but I was so tired I got some answers wrong. I messed up big time. Okay, so I messed up a lot. That's what big time means there. So very different meaning there. A third one then, again, a different way to use big time. So, do you like Italian food? Oh yeah, big time. Okay, so you can see that they're different means. And in the third one there, oh yeah, big time. That just means, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really do. That's all that means. It's just an emphatic way of saying that you do like something. Get a big head. The idea of this is that you get so full of yourself, as the saying goes, or you get a big ego and you're very proud of yourself, and you might get a little bit obnoxious, but the head would get so big. Some people say that your head will get so big you can't get in the door. So that's another way of thinking about this. So she's really successful and is still really easy to talk to. I'm glad she didn't get a big head and forget all her friends. Okay, so they're glad that she didn't get, when they say get a big head, that she thought so much of herself that she didn't want to talk to anyone from her past. Okay, so we hope you liked this video here. There's a lot to cover here. If you have questions, make sure to drop them in the comments for us, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Hit like and subscribe, and we'll be back to you as soon as possible with some new videos. And we'll be doing some live streams. We do that every Thursday, and we look forward to seeing you there. Take care. Thank you. Bye bye.